Coming three speakers will be part or are sorted under the topic of nature's economies. And before I give the first one of them the floor, I just want to ask to Marlou, one of the program director of the Economia Festival, what's Baltan ideas? What are Baltan's ideas behind nature's economies, behind this team?
Thank you, Koen. Yeah, the basic question we're looking at with nature's economies is actually if we can learn from nature when it comes to building our economy and building our society. This theme started with the question, can we imagine a healthy economy that is not built on ultimate growth or unlimited growth? So from there, we started to think like, could our economy become more like nature, more like a closed system that grows, flourishes, and decays, where flows of matter, lives, and energy are feeding each other, and at the same time balancing out? What would be needed to create such an economy, and could it also influence the way we organize our society? So those are mainly the questions that are in this theme, that we formed this theme around.
Okay, thanks a lot. And maybe Mladen, you're still sharing your screen. So either I want to ask you to stop sharing it or ask Marlou to do it as well.
Yeah, please, can you, because I'm struggling to find controls back.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned yesterday already briefly, somewhere in a distant past, I graduated at a master in biochemistry, so it should not come as a surprise that I'm really looking forward to what Marlou has just been introducing and what is ahead of us. How can we draw parallels, learn from natural systems, and project those insights onto the systems we create ourselves? I think that's also exactly, if I understood correctly, the topic of the first talk, which will be by Martin Schmalzried, if I pronounce that correctly. And it will be about mirroring biology. So Martin, I give you the microphone and the screen.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. All right, so I'll share my screen. There we go. Can you see it? Perfect. So my talk is going to be about mirroring biology. I'm going to try to put this out of the way. Yeah. So, of course, I invite you to read the paper that I submitted because I won't be able to go into details, the presentation in 10 minutes, of course. And this is about basically the necessary evolution of the economic and financial system based on certain assumptions, which I'll go through right now. So the first thing is to sort of present the underlying philosophical assumptions of the paper. And that one is inspired by the philosophy of Arthur Koestler and holon philosophy. So a holon is a system that is a whole in itself, as well as a part of a larger system. It can be conceived as systems nested within each other. And every system can be considered a holon, from a subatomic particle to the universe as a whole. So it may seem very abstract, but if you look at the way that our science is built, then it's quite easy to understand. So you have electrons, protons, and neutrons, which are forming an atom. Then you have atoms bonding together, forming molecules, molecules bonding together to form proteins, amino acids. Then those proteins and amino acids coming together, forming living cells. And living cells get together to create living beings like us, animals, humans. And the question, obviously, that begs the question, does it stop there? And so if you look beyond us, then you have terms like ecosystems or biosphere that emerge. But we tend to think in our materialist science that all those are acting like they're kind of not intelligent. They are stupid, they work like little machines, you know, so we're perfectly fine and okay with the fact that our bodies are composed of tiny little machines that we call living cells, but they create something intelligent. At least we consider ourselves to be intelligent, conscious, but we don't assume, or we don't want to recognize, would like to recognize that maybe this logic extends beyond us and that we are also just a cell in a larger organism. And so in the whole-on philosophy, you can sort of have this kind of inside-outside kind of logic, where on the outside, you're trying to replicate the harmony that you found inside. So the easiest example closest to us is a living cell reproduces on the outside, that is our body, a much more complex sort of harmonious interaction than what it is on the inside. And each living cell obviously has its own sort of digestive system, like energy input and output. It also has its own kind of navigational system, nervous system to sort of have, you know, contacts with the outside. And it just replicates on a very much more complex level the same that it is on the inside via trial and error. And you can view the development of our society and our civilization in the same light. You could say that the internet is kind of like our nervous system for humanity. It allows us to send information and coordinate our actions better. The financial system can be like our circulatory system for humanity, because it's in charge of distributing energy, which is money, to various cells according to the needs of the organism. Now, of course, that can be well-placed or misplaced. So right now, you could say that the financial system doesn't allocate energy very efficiently. We use it to build multi-billion-dollar yachts, and we cannot even find a few million euros to invest in environmentally friendly technology. So, but it's nevertheless still, that's the image, basically. And of course, we could say that our current economic system is quite broken. We could see that we were talking about the dependence on growth in the session, and that is clearly what it is right now. I mean, you have the two graphs on the right-hand side of the screen is US money supply and world growth, GDP. And you could see that the monetary mass has mushroomed terribly, and the GDP, the number of available goods and services, also mushroomed exponentially. And of course, the whole system is based on the fact that the total amount of money has to grow in sync with the total amount of goods and services. Otherwise, you have things that we've heard of like hyperinflation or deflation. And the whole system also relies on a rollover of credit into infinity. And you cannot sort of forsake growth. You cannot get rid of growth, because if you don't have growth, you cannot pay for the interest on the debt. And so you're kind of stuck there. And that kind of exponential expansion mirrors something that we've seen in our own organisms. It's kind of the development of the fetus in the womb, where everything grows and expands and continuously grows and grows and grows until it reaches a sort of a plateau where either the baby is born or, of course, it suffocates and it dies out, kind of like we're suffocating right now on our planet. Now, there is a quote that is quite controversial and nobody really understood its deeper meaning: from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Now, that's Karl Marx, and it's kind of the cornerstone of his idea of communism, which was, of course, terribly applied. But if you try to see how our body works, it's actually very much in that kind of, according to that kind of philosophy and quote. So each cell receives what it needs depending on its ability or what it is doing and what the body is doing. So if you're digesting, the energy flows seamlessly to your stomach. If you're resting, then energy also adapts. If you're running, it rushes to your legs. And obviously each cell needs to have the amount of energy it requires, no more nor less, and it has to be sort of affected in the best ways. So, you know, continuing with the metaphors, of course, they have their limits because the level of complexity increases at each level of this hold-on kind of structure. So the lungs are kind of like the private banks, because they are the ones right now that are creating the money. So the total availability of the oxygen, you could say. And the central banks are like the heart. They're kind of responsible for velocity of money and the speed at which it circulates by their policies of increasing, decreasing interest rates, and whether there's more savings or more spending. And today's situation is a mix of hyperventilation, like you're really breathing really quickly, and at the same time, you cannot assimilate that oxygen somehow. And it really makes me think of the coronavirus, of course, which even if you're breathing, it sounds like, you know, you're not being oxygenated properly. So we're printing all this money, QE, quantitative easing, it's not reaching the people. And so it's very much, that's what it makes me think of. And then, of course, what is the solution when you try to inspire yourself from how our body distributes energy? And here we have to dig into blockchain, of course, would be an interesting technology to look at, which was non-dependent on centralized authorities to do anything, like the fetus is dependent on the placenta, basically, to receive its energy. And here it's the relative theory of money is a new kind of theory, which describes a new financial system where everyone co-produces the money. And I invite you, the link is in the PowerPoint. I invite you to read that because I cannot go into depth. So the biggest problem is price stability. As we've heard from the previous speaker, when you have price instability, it really wreaks havoc in economies. And the relative theory of money leverages the principle of relativity to ensure that money becomes a stable measuring stick, leveraging math. So it's kind of like the speed of light for Einstein, like he uses that as a stable measuring stick for measuring all the other things that can fluctuate. Now, this is very technical, and I hope I won't be spending too much time on this, but basically I have three individuals in a fictitious economy. They each start with a certain amount of money, like on the left side 1,500, 3,000, 4,500. On the left side, you have the measurements in individual units of money. And there you can see that if people receive the universal dividend each year, then the monetary mass and the individual amount of money that they have increases exponentially as well. On the right-hand side, you have the money expressed in relative terms. That is, you decide that this universal dividend is your measuring stick. It's like counting in salaries. If everybody has the same salary, you can count in salaries. You can say that a piece of like bread is 0.01 unit of your salary. And there you divide basically the individual units that they have by the new value of the universal dividend, which grows at 10% each year. And you can see what it happens naturally is that when you are in the mean, so you have a sort of mean amount of wealth, you keep your amount of money. So that individual L2 has 10, continuously 10 throughout time. The person that has less than 10, his relative share of the total wealth that is available goes to 10, towards 10. And the person that is the wealthiest, his share of the total amount of money decreases proportionally to the others. So everybody is sort of pooled towards the mean. And that kind of mirrors also the way that our body works, as I'll show you later on. So the second idea is also that the total amount of wealth that you produce during your lifetime as a generation, like you're born in here on this illustration, you're born in 1974, your generation will probably die out somewhere in 2054, with life expectancy 80 years. And so the total money that you have produced across your lifetime is proportional to the percentage of the population that you represent. And so once everybody from that generation died, because the universal dividend is increased by 10% in its value, the money that you produced when you were a baby is worth nothing anymore. And so it gives basically each generation an equal voting right in determining what has value, and no generation can actually control most of the monetary mass and make the decisions on what is important and what should be produced in the society. So that's the underlying philosophy of the relative theory of money, is an equal right of each individual to determine what has value and what doesn't across time. Meaning that each generation has an equal voting weight in determining what has value, the relative control of the monetary mass every day and through time. And that's important because ultimately, when you're buying bread from your baker, you are voting in a way. You're voting for the endured existence of that good, for instance, because you're supporting the baker by buying his bread. And he can then invest with that money, he can start producing more. And obviously, if you have private banks that are in control over the creation, monetary creation, they have a disproportionate voting right on what the economy should look like, because they can decide who gets a loan, who doesn't. And then that already skews what products are going to be available to buy. So it's the same kind of principle as the wisdom of the crowd, basically. So the implications is that growth is no longer required. Each individual receives this universal dividend, and then the economy can actually fluctuate around that, because that is the stable measuring stick, mathematically sort of programmed to have stability. And as you could see from here, you see the monetary mass, the monetary mass stays at 30, simply because the value is continuously reassessed depending on the value of the universal dividend. The economy will reflect more accurately the sum total of each individual decisions to buy a certain service or not. So basically the economy, it's as if every person had an equal voting right every day to determine what is important for them personally. And then that has an impact on what the economy looks like. If people go to McDonald's, then you have a lot of McDonald's. If people buy organic food, there'll be a lot of organic stores. But there's no set outcome. It's just that the sum total of each individual decision then creates something bigger. Kind of the same as the hold-on philosophy. And the velocity of money can fluctuate then depending on the needs, which mirrors how our own body works. So here up on the first graph up there is an oxygen consumption, exercise and rest. So you see that energy sort of peaks, like oxygen consumption peaks when you're exercising, and then it goes back down gradually when you're going back to rest. And the same phenomenon can be seen when people spend money. There's a lot of economic activity, and then everything is pulled towards the mean as new money is printed into the economy. So this is the last slide. So the system is based on freedom with no set outcome other than the sum total of each individual decision. So humanity can destroy itself with this or thrive and move past current challenges it is facing. And the responsibility is then redistributed back to each individual. So it's no longer about replacing an elite, which is now a political elite, with an enlightened one, which has great ideas about environmental policies or whatever. And one which should make decisions on behalf of humanity and then be a scapegoat in case things don't go well, as is the case right now. Like you elect people and then you blame them when things go wrong. Here it's about putting humanity's destiny back into its own hands. And with that, I'll leave you with that. So thank you for your time and feel free to contact me. And thank you so lot for the opportunity for speaking. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot, Martin, for at least having tried to explain a 44-page paper in 10 minutes. So that's why I also allowed you a few minutes overtime. Don't worry about that. Is there any way you could share the paper? Is it available online, or where can people find your
well, you have
manuscript?
I
have it, but I'm not not to share it, and I'm just the messenger. So
well, then I mean, just reach out to me via email if you want a copy of it, and I might try to upload it somewhere and then send you the link that you can share with participants if you want, or put it on the online or something.
Yeah,
that works for you.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, and then maybe we're still seeing your screen. So
yeah, I think I can
stop sharing, then we can move on to the next. Yeah.
Wait a minute. How does that work? There. I think I stopped it.
Yeah, great. Cool. Thanks a lot. And then we can move on to our next speaker, who, as I already mentioned, has my utmost respect for being, I think, in the middle of the night or very early in the morning at least. So Kimberley Bianca, she's a first-year PhD student in emergent technologies and media arts, and she's going to talk to us about curating eco-media art. So the floor or the screen.
Hello. Can you just say something, because I couldn't hear you? Oh, you were putting yourself on mute. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Great. Can you see the presentation? Hi, so I am the winner. It's 5:11 a.m. now, and I've been with you all day. So I have not slept yet. So bear with me. I don't know. Let's see how it goes. So I'm Kimberley. I'm from Australia, but I'm studying in the US. I'm an audiovisual artist, and I also spent several years around Europe living in art communes and playing at outdoor free parties and doing hackathons, trying to earn a living through that, which is not really possible. It was good times, but now it's time to study. So I'm part of this conference because I wanted to hear about how you're all thinking about challenging our dominant economic system, as well as holistic approaches to ecological sustainability. For my second year in the PhD, I'll be developing a workshop program for DIY repairs and prototyping creative pieces with obsolete and broken technology, alongside developing an online forum for exchanging hardware and media assets. So while there should be greater effort to disrupt corporate e-waste and encourage commons, for now, I'm mostly concerned with community-centered caring that allows for justice and climate health. A more community-centered approach is to distribute agency between curators or anyone in a cultural leadership position, or anybody in a leadership position really, with artists and the public, often using technology. I approached this concept during my master's, where I restructured an arts organization into a peer-to-peer social network where the executive team could effectively be removed, they do take a lot of money from organizations. So but the organization could still function when removing these key players. They could also apply for grants and produce events without them. There's lots of implications there, which isn't the topic today, but it does have this kind of same field into also like post-labor and new economic systems. So in this sense, the role of the curator or the leader becomes a facilitator or mediator, and they're like nodes in a network who can help organize and moderate while being transparent about power relations. The potential of distributed curatorial practice means leaders and stewards who represent diverse human cultural beliefs and artifacts can confront the colonizer's worldview hierarchy and reclaim representations of nature that's been asserted by the arts and sciences. In parallel to breaking down the hierarchies of art, environmental communication is accessible to communities through democratic science and problem solving. It's incredibly difficult to monitor and measure where our electronic waste is going, hence reports like this being so vague. But convergence research in regards to sustainability sciences is an emerging field which may help us look at this larger picture through multiple frameworks. But what convergence research needs to focus less on is technical fixes to what are social and economic problems. Rather than bringing people together to solve a problem, we can collaborate on possibilities. So my main question right now is, how can repairing, repurposing, reusing, and recycling of electronics be more participatory and engaging? Ecomedia Arts offers a space for meaningful and reflective participation. Practitioners can appropriate their consumption and waste without fighting with or who is accountable. For example, software processes and our so-called immaterial digital products run on physical hardware and energy consumption, and they depend on the system of natural resource extraction, questionable manufacturing, and exploitative labor, just like any other industry. How can we be engaged with the goals of sustainability as a stimulant and not as a restriction? I don't want to make people feel bad. Like, that's not, I know there's a lot of that going on in academia. Like, hey, we should do this. Like, we need to all feel bad together. So, but like, I'm not going to be sharing the images of dumping grounds and people in Ghana and China reclaiming toxic materials for their livelihood. I think that already set like a picture in their head. However, people feel discomfort. This is a form of praxis that can help us think of new goals rather than push solutions to problems where we haven't had involvement of all those affected, be it humans and other animals or nature. So there are some methods. I mean, these aren't your typical academic methods, but in regards to just overall, like me trying to organize what I'm going to do next with my research. So with tracking and mapping, there are some sophisticated tools out there by institutions and governments. There's the eTrash Transparency Project by the Basel Action Network, where they've set 200 tags and identifiers to electronics and traced where they've gone around the world, and they've gone to the wrong places, not where they were supposed to go. And things like MIT's Sensible City Lab Interactive Map, which is in that image there on the left, where different manufacturers and retailers have opted in to having their products traced and tracked around the world. But these initiatives only track like the tools and nothing about the people in any part of this chain. And so what I'm proposing is mapping the like interwoven interactions between people with our tools and the environment on a really small scale to begin with, like in a workshop space, using similar tools like tagging identifiers and drawing maps with where the objects we're taking apart or building in a workshop space, seeing where they're going, how long they stay with a person. Repair and reuse, cultural leaders, curators can really play a big role here in encouraging artists to minimize and to repair and reuse and even recycle parts of artworks that aren't being used anymore. This is already done a lot in the theatre industry, so why not in the fine arts? Because people like their authorship and their ownership. So, and peer exchange, the idea of this is very practical and pragmatic, that we can actually trade hardware and assets we can trade equipment amongst each other, but also as a space for exchanging ideas. Despite like the obvious links of technology production and anthropogenic disaster, there's still like a strong justification that individuals and communities should have all the technological means they need to change their social structures right now. And the way around this contradiction is thinking of complementary ways which empower individuals and communities to generate a sustainable future for themselves. I don't know how much time I have, but I'm hoping I have like 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, that's good. Great. So, so what this is coming together is called circuit board. Because I've only done 1 year of the PhD so far, I'm trying not to get trying to keep this project quite open and ready to be adapted into something completely different within the next 3 years. But at the moment, I thought, okay, I'm gonna start this initiative. So Circuit Board is a hybrid media art platform with virtual and face-to-face meetups and a forum for exchanging technology and media. I'd like to see how and if we can manage resources based on trust, creativity, and cooperation. In my past experiences with web-based community platforms, they don't work too well without an existing face-to-face community. So my plan was to start with face-to-face meetups, and there were 2, and then co-design the online platform gradually. Well, yeah, with COVID, I really had to rethink this and like quickly prototype an online and hybrid infrastructure for this community forum. Some of the activities that traverse like across both meetups and an online forum space, and this is like creating together with limited technology and resources. So maybe posting out toolkits to people who want to be involved in, say, a specific event, and we all either have share the same parts in the toolkit, or we have different components, and then we create them on Zoom together, and then eventually somebody gets all the parts and assembles them together. Exchanging our favorite equipment, like our favorite guitar or something, which challenges our ownership, and lending our artworks and DIY instruments, synthesizers, etc., challenging our authorship. And my favorite icebreaker, well, for the 2 I had, was just sharing stories of how we broke our things and why we're still keeping them or why we threw them out. This project has, like, I think, a much greater potential at providing opportunities for people with socioeconomic disadvantages to access resources. So maybe that's something that I could look into later on, especially since I'm in such a privileged position to be in the university. Maybe I can find some kind of networks to somehow like bring the technology out of the institution into the community that they can use. And to conclude, curating eco-media art advocates a closed cycle, a closed loop, a circuit, hence the name. And in the name of Zizek's Do Nothing, protesting governments and corporations could be seen as contributing to keeping the current order of things and a waste of community resources. DIY art communities aim to do nothing, buy nothing, and sell nothing in the commercial sphere, subverting the corporate cycle by repairing, repurposing, and exchanging existing technologies. In this sense, community resources are better spent by creating activities in their own community. So I don't know if this is so much about innovating an economy, redesigning it, but really even just not being in it to a degree, or trying to not be in it and waiting till there's, I don't know, somewhere to jump in and keeping our resources to where we can actually create something that is on its own sustainable. Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for these interesting projects and also the outlook and sharing your, well, the road where you want to go or try to go. While you were talking, made me think about, and I see that Baltan is already posting it in the chat, a project that Baltan was doing 5-6 years ago called Age of Wonderland, where research fellows from all over the world were invited to co-create here in the Netherlands. And one of them was from Indonesia. And he was especially working with electronics, and what we think are low-cost electronics, well, $10 type of things. For them, low-cost electronics was 10 cents type of devices. So, and also they were a lot involved in electronic waste, involving the community. So I think the link has been shared in the chat. So might be a very good way to start your journey, maybe, or to be part of your journey.
That's great. Send links anybody if you want, because I'm building a literature review. So I did have some things I was going to show, but I thought this is 10 minutes, so focus on this. So yeah, send me links of anything in this field.
Okay, thanks a lot. And then we'll move on to the final speaker of this session and also of the two-day conference. And then the honor is to Don Diojdescu, if I pronounce that correctly, and Mathias Lehner. And their talk will not be about a sales pitch, but about a sales pitch, if I'm correct. So I'm very curious, and the screen is all yours.
Okay. I'm sharing the screen. Can you see it? Good, fantastic. Okay, we started to the last slide, but I think we go very fast with the presentation. Basically, our title kind of changed because the submission was before the corona, and now we are in a world that it's a bit changed, and we try to make it a little bit more up to date. So we talk about urban and nature, urban versus nature, and urban nature, in the sense that basically so far we're looking very much how nature shapes economy, but we try to look a little bit how the economy shapes nature, and mostly from the perspective of the urban environment. And as we probably know, for about 3 million years, people are living pretty much like this. They were part of the nature, and nature wasn't a resource, was their body, the extended body. And it didn't go that bad, basically, because, you know, for a few million years, people start to continue to populate the earth. And by the way, these images are quite recent. So, you know, they are still living like this, which shows that it wasn't such a bad model. Now, you know, this is in Australia. The previous were in Kyrgyzstan, in Central Asia. And this is how it looks inside. This is an yurt, and this is a Moroccan tent. So I would say it's not particularly unpleasant to live in. Now, change of paradigm. About 8,000 years ago, we moved from a nomadic economy to an agrarian economy. So we started to have cities. And you know, at the beginning, there were like 2,000, 3,000 people. We ended up at about 10,000, 20,000, like Rome, like Babylon. And we ended up with something a bit more staggering like this, with 12 million people living on the same place. Now, what is the connection between nature and economy when you talk about cities? It's very simple. The reason why we ended up moving from nature into these boxes is mainly the Industrial Revolution. So it's up to the 18th century, you know, even big cities like Paris or like London weren't so big that were looking like this. We have the Industrial Revolution, we have people moving from the countryside to the urban environment, and with this, with a change of economic paradigm from mostly agrarian society to an industrial society, there was a change of perspective as well, meaning that people were looking more or less to themselves as machines. It's a machinistic view, this view that makes sense to see yourself as a tool that will stay in a tool shelter rather than into an environment that is conceived for you as part of it. And this is how we ended up to this rampant, I would say, urbanization. More about the mechanism, the economical mechanism that move people from in average 20 hours week work to 40, 60, even 80 hours week work in the industrial era, and moving from living in the nature to moving in boxes is Michel Bouwens, who will talk a little bit more at 5 o'clock. I will just show a few more pictures, and it's not only in the United States that happens like this, it's pretty much everywhere in the world. Yeah. And basically what I'm trying to do at this moment is to use the complexity science and network modeling to identify ways of mapping the human and non-human stakeholders within our extended environment, and then integrate this into policies that will help the development of living environment, not taking from the nature, but being integrated in the nature. And one aspect that, let's say, is the added value, the new perspective that comes in this science of networks and mapping of environment is that so far we're talking about nature and human. Now we have to talk about human and non-human stakeholders, and we talk about non-human, we talk about nature, but also we talk about all the objects that actually exist already there. So a change in paradigm, a change in the way we are living will not happen overnight. People will not live this horrible, from my perspective, dwelling just to move in the nature and live like nomads in 3 years or 5 years. And even if they do this, these objects will stay there. And the whole idea is to find a way to integrate these 3 dimensions and come up with something that is fitted for what is called now the digital nomad society, where more and more of the economic paradigm moves towards the digitalization and the presence, the overwhelming presence of internet and technologies like 3D printing and so on. So basically, this is how I introduce a little bit the connection between economy and nature, and in this case, the nature of the way we are living, respectively the urban environment. And honestly, I'm at the beginning of this mapping and trying to figure it out how the complexity science and networks can help a better environment for us to live. Mathias will have some more to add to this topic. Oh, and here's more. And here's Mathias.
Well, thank you very much for this presentation. Maybe I think it's better if I take over the sharing the screen. Let me check if I can do this. Let me have a look if this works. Can you see my screen now? Yes, perfect. So thank you very much. I would like to talk about this urban and nature combination more, about a next city, and I would like to share with you the idea if this new systemic approach we see in architecture today can serve as an inspiration for economy. Picking up the thread of Dan, I would like to contribute some observations from my professional as an architect, researcher, and university teacher. And I'm very grateful for your invitation to speak here today. And I would like to argue that we are at a tipping point, and the past period can be seen as a critical momentum for this change Dan was talking about. And this will be a change for architecture and also for economy. And I'm a little bit talking more about nature and cities and ecosystems, and in connection also with, we heard with Martin before. And also thanks Kimberley for your presentation. And I will also not show so much the disadvantages, but as an architect also looking to the future with an optimistic point of view. Today, We are at the point in history where we have an unprecedented huge amount of knowledge available, and we are capable of interfering with most complex systems. In Holland, maybe you know, we temporarily changed the direction of rivers, to just give an example. But as Harari says, we know how to interfere, but we are not yet aware of all the widespread and unexpected consequences of our actions. Or if you look at Albert Schweitzer, he put it wisely, I think 100 years ago, we are living in dangerous times, he said. We have learned to dominate nature before mastering ourselves. And the image you see here, of course, is the design of the landscape design of Versailles. And Le Notre in 1660 on the swamp, which was considered a bad landscape, and that man had to improve it in a very strict way. So since the Renaissance, we are claiming such a dominant position. We have disconnected ourselves from nature by thinking and designing our built environment. Man is a part of nature, but had put himself above it or even outside nature. Today, we are spending most of our days indoors, in offices or homes. The past months of COVID-19 showed unprecedented climates that did not go well. I know of cities where you had increase of domestic violence, psychological stress, and we heard some of course, also from Kimberley and others. But how was your Corona time so far, especially when you think about the lockdown period? I hope it didn't look like this. Playtime, of course, by Jacques Tati, 1967. But I want to move to a more optimistic perspective. Today we understand complexity better than ever before. We recognize our planet, also as Martin said, as an ecosystem, and we realize that we are only part of that natural system, one part. We are ordinary animals too, and not, as previously viewed, the one species that is placed above nature trying to dominate it. So also cities, as Stan said, they are ecosystems, and that's actually a subject I'm teaching at the Academy of Architecture in Amsterdam. Humans flock to ever-growing cities, ideally arrival cities, as Sanders put it. They hope for a better future. The majority of man is already living in cities, and rushing urban growth does not help when it comes to this quality of life in cities. And then I don't even talk about climate change. To put it short, especially for my profession, but I think also for economists, it's time to act. This is the growth, as you can see, of the larger cities per hour in 2015, which has only increased ever since. But also on the smaller scale, we have realized that also our buildings are part of a more complex system. Often simple architectural design in the past and the best intentions, even of modernism, have made us live and work in ultimate protection from nature, although we are nature too. It was said earlier that they are sometimes more suitable than storing tools, our buildings. And instead of increasing well-being and productivity, they can contribute to large numbers of stress-related illnesses and burnout. In Holland, we have something which is called overspannen, and that has increased 50% in the last 10 years. We even coined the term sick buildings. But also in that respect, we have recently learned to think in systems. When it comes to the input of offices, for example, experts have found out that more than 10 criteria are relevant for the well-being and optimal performance of people working in offices. That means that they also deliver social and ecological values, happiness, fitness, productivity, and increased self-esteem. You can even get a certificate for this criteria, which is appropriately named WELL. And within these criteria, also the connection of with nature is one of the topics, but about that more in a minute. As an architectural designer, of course, I look at global urgencies and economy, the topic of this conference, from the perspective of design. By default, design thinking can deal with a lot of unknown factors. Designing and research by design is thinking in systems with many, sometimes unknown variables. and differs substantially from other scientific research, I would like to argue that in this situation, it's an advantage when you look at complex matters we are facing today. As an architect, my focus is the future of the city and how to improve quality of life in a time when we face not only economic pressure in our city, but also global urgencies like climate change. In fact, our actions in trying to dominate nature set us apart from nature, and we have set a huge footprint on our planet. But as children of this man-made age, the Anthropocene, as Cruijsen put it, we can also adapt the footprint in benefit of the planet. We can reconnect to nature, and I guess many of us felt this urge in the lockdown period. This is not too strange because we are part of nature too. And the term biophilia by Wilson expresses this natural need, and biophilic design shows how to reconnect with nature in design and building materials. So we need porosity towards nature in our enclosed buildings and porosity in our traditional thinking. We need to open windows in thinking and in reality. So I think this weather project by Eliasson illustrates very well this inner urge to connect with nature. And there's good reasons to do so, because research shows that being in connection with nature makes people feel better and perform better. Patients get well quicker in hospitals, students learn better in schools. Reconnecting with nature in the domain of architectural design is my personal interest and focus. With our platform, Next City, we published the first guide to nature inclusive building in 2019. And as an architect, I'm dealing in the promise of a better future. And by definition, I'm an optimist. Therefore, I'd like to refer to the Microsoft CEO, Nadella, who started, was mentioned in the introduction, that we did 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months in this period. And I think this black swan of COVID-19 can also be seen as a chance when it comes to introducing nature and thinking in natural ecosystems. Introduce the other values next to economic as social values and ecological values, as Brundtland put it in the Sustainable Development Criteria. So why not make our buildings and cities nature inclusive? And the Netherlands, they are highly digitized. As a trades nation, they are interested in profit, and there's a lot of profit, which I mentioned before. And in Holland, we are pragmatic. So why not let buildings deliver social, ecological, and economic values to our economies by ecosystem services? Rediscovering the fact that our cities are urban ecosystems make us able to see the value of these ecosystem services. And with the Dutch attitude of makeability, to design a rich ecosystem and receive their revenues, such as biodiversity, supporting, provisioning, regulating, and cultural ecosystem services. This includes buffering heavy rains, avoid floods, moderate urban heat islands, absorb fine dust, and not the least, provide us with food, medicine, and building materials. In short, we can improve the quality of life of all species. And this is my last slide. Quality of life of all species, especially in cities where the future of mankind takes place, is a task for research, policy, and design. We learned that again in the conference organized by Vereniging Delta Metropole in Vienna a couple of days ago. And to come back to my initial statement, we are at a tipping point. And we know things we did not know in the past. We can think in complexity today, and by thinking nature inclusive, we are able to contribute to the Paris goals, the Davos Declaration, and the UN Sustainable Development Goal. And we learned that design can show us how this sustainable nature inclusive future could look like. This is the Forest City concept by Stefan Boeri, who built a couple of buildings, including in Eindhoven. Is building one, I think, the Trudeau-toren, that combines nature and city. So I think it's a change in economy which is needed, and design can be of use in that, because we learned that knowing that we have to change does not help, but design just might. So today, I think the time is right for this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dan and Mathias, for this interesting look through your work and ideas. It actually, two of the talks that were just presented, they made me remind of the lecture by Rion Brandt on co-emerging economies. And for two reasons, maybe Mathias, you were saying we have to reconnect with nature, and in Rion's talk was that actually, if you look at some substances that are no longer in our Western diets, but that have psychedelic effects, that actually, even without them being to the level of being a drug or addictive or whatever, that they can help reconnecting us with nature. So I think it would be interesting to see, to look at his theories on co-emerging futures, and how this indeed also might give a solution to reconnect with nature. And then another reason why I was thinking of this talk, and this I think will bring me also, will bring us into the Q&A, and I'm going to just steal the first question, and that will be to Martin, and also linking it to Rion Brandt's theory on co-emerging futures. In his talk, he describes 4 scenarios that probably neither one of them will be the ultimate scenario for our future, but they each give a direction into which the world could be going if you follow a certain line of thought. And Martin, what I understood from your presentation is that there's some kind of self-correction mechanism in terms of monetary value, if you want, or income value. But somewhere by the end of your talk, you said it's time to give back society to society and make each individual accountable again. And then I'm like, yeah, maybe it's my reflex, a wrong reflex of saying, like, is there also like an auto-correction mechanism? Because obviously if society or humanity chooses to destroy itself, is that then the way we should just follow the masses? We all know where the masses go, right? So I was just wondering, is there some kind of mechanism built in there, or am I then too conservative again?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting philosophical question, but I just wanted to say that we've already been there before. In the 19th century, when democracy was emerging, the foremost argument against democracy was that the people were stupid, that they would make poor choices of governments, and that we should leave it to kings and aristocrats because obviously they're educated and intelligent. And more than a century later, I mean, we haven't disappeared, and arguably we thrived a little better than if we were just still under kings and aristocrats. And sometimes it's this counterintuitive thing where it's by giving people more responsibility that they act more responsibly. So long as you don't give them any responsibility, then they can pretend like they don't have any and act like children. But some like suddenly when you give them responsibility, then you might be pleasantly surprised. And the thing is, I mean, you were talking about scenarios. I think that there are 2 overarching scenarios. Basically, is that the story of the universe tends to go towards these hold-on structures, whether we like it or not. So you can just see it emerging. That's the reason life emerged in the first place. That's the reason we exist. I mean, you cannot deny that it happened before, which is reason to believe that it will happen later. And what I think is that we're just having the choice of how we want to experience the emergence of the hold-on that represents us inside nature. And one of those is, if you read Homo Deus from Hariri, he's basically saying that the future might look like artificial intelligence, that we sort of the singularity that we create, either by chance or, you know, it just happens with the quantum computer, some intelligence that is way higher than us. And we're all microchipped and have chips in our brains. And then that supercomputer sort of starts controlling us, you know, via the internet and controlling every single one of our actions. Now, that's the description of humanity becoming one global organism, arguably a very negative experience in a negative form. but it's still, that's what it is. And you could say that to ourselves, we are some form of artificial intelligence that is sending electroshocks by the nervous system to make the arms move and whatever, to make them assume certain positions. I don't believe that's how our cells experience it, but nevertheless, we have the choice of how we want to experience it. And one other way we can experience it is to have the belief that somehow the individual actions of each human being somehow will sort of fall into place in the right way so that something coherent emerges out of it. And that's, I think, more accurately how our bodies work. I don't think that there is kind of a central intelligence dictating what each and every single cell should be doing, but that each and every cell sort of is conscious of what it can contribute. And the sum total of the billions and billions and billions of actions that happen every seemingly uncoordinated way give us this illusion of stability, when in fact, right now as I'm talking, there are billions and billions of chemical reactions that are happening all the time, and it looks like absolute chaos when you look on the inside. But then on the outside, it looks perfectly calm and everything is normal. So that's my take on the future and those two kind of scenarios, and then in a lot of in between, of course. But yeah, you have two major choices, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And indeed, it's reassuring to hear that the autocorrection mechanism is just inherently built inside ourselves. So I think that's indeed, I fully agree that if you give responsibility, people will act responsible. So that's also at least what I believe in and what I hope. Now, just in between questions, I think what struck me throughout the past 2 days, but also in the pre-recorded talks that are on the YouTube channel, is that there's a lot of, let's say, side steps into exact sciences like quantum theory and so on. And maybe I'm posting something now in the chat that everyone already knows, but one book that I was recently referred to and read with a lot of pleasure is Reality is Not What It Seems, by an Italian theoretical physicist. And it's, for me, it's a very comprehensive book on some of the fundamentals of our existence and our consciousness. So in case people are into this type of matter and have not read it, I can surely recommend it. Then let's see here if we have some questions in the chat window. I see a question from Nadia. Maybe Nadia, you can just unmute and ask your question to the speaker.
Yeah, my question is for a lot the different kind of speakers, because everyone is thinking about what we can learn from nature, or in urban, or in systems, or whatever. So I thought, is biomimicry, because I'm an architect, and we are also doing projects where we try to learn a lot from the philosophy of biomimicry and what we can learn from nature. And I was wondering in what way Mathias or Martin are implementing this kind of philosophy in their work. One thing that struck me, Martin, is, for example, he had, you talked about blockchain as something you could use. And we have found out, because we worked with a lot of data informaticians, and we learned that blockchain uses a lot of energy. Every transaction means that it costs like a whole year of energy of your fridge. So when you think about that, and in nature, nature is very known that it's very energy efficient. So blockchain is not really something we would recommend if you want to, think in a sustainable way. But blockchain has really some also advantages, of course, and they use it more and more in services in little chain domains with companies, or companies that work with each other, which means, and in banking also, which could benefit them more than if you do it really in a blockchain system as it was meant to be. So I was wondering how you can you make use of biomimicry in your research and thinking? To Mathias, Martin.
Maybe let's start with Mathias. As an architect, I can assume you have an answer to this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nadia, for the interesting question, and interesting to see that the architect asks something to the architect. But I think Martin can also contribute from his point of view. I'm very curious to hear. I think in principle, when we look at architecture or construction, and that's why I was talking about systems, is that it's a linear process, right?
Yeah.
You design, you build something, and even if it doesn't turn out the way you want, you stick to the plan. And even if it's finished, maybe the architect even leaves. And we are moving to circular thinking, that what happens even when the building is in use or adapted or out of use. But I think why I talk about a more systemic approach is because I actually think it's interesting to look one step more ahead, to look at the impact at the various players, humans and others, with your work. So in that respect, I think biomimicry is very interesting, has not so much my focus, but of course we know that since when was it, a couple of years ago, that suddenly somebody was swimming the fastest because the famous swimming suit.
Yeah, yeah, shark skin, you mean?
Yes, exactly, was using something around us for 1,000, even longer of years, and was badly copied, and still such an improvement. So I think there is a huge library of some parts even unlocked, and that's what I was talking about, is why the time is right, that we tend to unlock these things. There is roof tiles who are self-cleaning. There is all kinds of building materials who use the principle of biomimicry, and this comes basically from the idea of listening and learning from what's around you. And I think that's why I showed Lehner away from the dominating to be an equal, and to also find out, wow, there has some clever thinking or evolution taking place, and we can take profit from it. But I think Martin will go in more detail also on this.
Yes, Martin, is there anything you would like to add?
What's that? Yeah, so just on blockchain, I mean, I already saw Diana also respond. We shouldn't mistake blockchain for Bitcoin. Basically, Bitcoin consumes extreme amounts of energy, many other public blockchains also, but there are technologies and solutions to that problem that are being tested right now in Ethereum and the Medalla test network, where you have staking instead of proof of work. It's technical, but it's like looking at a picture of the first telephone towers in the 19th century. It was totally crazy. You had wires running everywhere. It was just insane. And that's just how it is with new technologies. When they start, you have these, it's not really efficient, the first cars and everything. And then it just gets better. So I don't have any problem with that. I'm more interested in the underlying philosophy of blockchain, and the fact that no one is in control and everyone is in control. That is, that each individual can run a node and each individual participates in the network and in the governance. And that's, I think, absolutely key today. I think it's the next step in democracy. Basically, my presentation was applying democracy to finance. That's all. It's just one further step in what we've been doing already, which brings me to the point about biomimicry. In my view, we've never left biomimicry. That's the whole process that we've been doing. It's trying to apply on the outside world, an imperfect representation of what we think happens on the inside in our own bodies. So, the way we think about our bodies is basically what's reflected on the outside, the way we act in the outer world. And so the most fundamental biomimicry is simply trying to replicate on the outside the harmony that you have on the inside. And obviously, it's like looking at a gas of hydrogen cloud right before it bursts into a star. The experience of those hydrogen atoms must be very unpleasant, and they must feel compressed and terrible. But at some point, they reach a stage where they become something more than the sum of their parts, and then it's a totally different story. And so I think what we should focus our efforts on is simply achieving harmony in, first and foremost, the way we behave towards each other. I think that's what actually sets us apart from, you know, succeeding and thriving, because it's the elements that should find a way to interact in a harmonious way, and then everything sort of solves itself. If you look at a living cell, all of the chemical reactions in it are perfectly stable, perfectly stabilized. Everything is perfect within. They're very energy efficient and everything. But it's because they sort of, you could say, they've reached an understanding of how to behave in such a way as to create something bigger than themselves. And if you look at how we behave towards each other, it's still kind of who's dominating who, who's the boss, who's controlling who. And that is, I think, what keeps us from accessing, you know, more energy or different kind of technologies and plenty of things, or even achieving, you know, the visions of Mathias, for instance, and his cities. I think basically when we unlock that, then everything else is easy. And if you think also what the first thing that forms in a global organism is the heart. The circulatory system is the first thing that appears, you know, always. And then the rest of the organs appear. So if we solve the problem, and obviously when you have a heart attack, you know, it's pointless operating on your stomach or fixing other things. You have to first and foremost make sure that the heart keeps beating, and then you can work on other things. Yeah. So that's why we're so focused, and that's why this conference, Economia, is well placed, because that's the priority. Once people have that, then it unlocks everything. The vision I have is the economy as a permanent crowdfunding, you know, where people always have resources to vote for great ideas. Like Mathias would say, hey, help me build this city, and boom, he can get millions and millions of euros in funding for prototypes and projects. And by redistributing money to the people, they then have those voting vouchers to be able to do that every single day, and not every 5 years for some elites that, you know, don't represent their interests.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks a lot for these elaborate reactions. I'm not sure. Sorry, Nadia. I'm just first going to give someone else maybe an opportunity to ask a question. I'm not sure if I'm not seeing any questions anymore in the chat, but maybe someone has been listening and not typing. So I'm not sure if there's someone who wants to. Yes, Diana, please.
Yeah, I just jumped in the middle of this session, changed my clothes, but I'm still here. So I was in this morning session. I was wondering, this biomimicry, Martin, you used the metaphor of the body and the cell system, and how everything is connected and cooperates. And so if there's like an abundance, things will happen, or a shortage. And it really reminds me of what I see every day in my garden. I'm quite an urban gardener. And I noticed that when I create abundance, more abundance will come. So I have like different sorts of species now I've never seen in my life before. I use to identify. And it's like I've been led into this secret of nature, of life, that it's in its complexity. It's very simple. As soon as we create abundance, things will start to happen. And isn't this the most important lesson for us as society, to create new economies? That this is what we need to do. And I think, so I'm a great believer of biodiversity and also diversity. I think we need all kinds of people, all kinds of questions, all kinds of projects to create that abundance. So I was wondering if you worked on the macro biomimicry picture of your models.
Yeah, so very briefly, because I already talked a lot, but you know, we are, if you can think of ourselves as the bridge between biology and something else. Clearly, you can see that we don't use biological terms to describe what's happening to us. We use sociology, economics, all kinds of it, philosophy. All those fields don't exist for living cells. So we are something still different. We're different. We have one leg in biology and one leg in something that we still cannot really pinpoint and give a name to. Now, what you're talking about, abundance, is really interesting, obviously, and it's true. Like, what I mean is that once you reassure people on their survival instincts, their survival needs, they stop behaving like animals, fighting and bickering food, for a roof over their heads. And that sort of liberates them and frees them to do other things. And so the abundance, I think, at our level, because we have one foot in biology, one foot in something else, that something else to me is the world of ideas, basically, simply speaking. That is what we produce as humans that is different from animals and different from other creatures, is ideas. And in order for ideas to flourish, you need to be reassured on your biological instincts. So you have enough food, you know you're gonna have shelter, you know you're gonna have all those things, you don't need to worry about all those things. And that frees your mind for being innovative, for being, you know, doing all the things that all the other people are doing. And also sort of, you know, hand back control to each individual and stop trying to control what ideas people are going to have. And that's going to be a big leap of faith, because right now that's what people are trying to do. That's what the media is trying to do. They're trying to tell everyone what ideas they should be having, whether they're good or bad, what they should be thinking. Everybody should be, I don't know, with this pandemic, you can see that, like, or plenty of different topics like 5G, the nuclear energy, and it's just like, we're being taught all the time, told all the time what we should think. And I think that is a very destructive path. I think diversity in ideas is what we're meant to be doing as humans.
Well, yeah, I fully agree. I think it's the basis of democracy as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Not sure if I still believe in democracy, but that's another discussion.
That's for tomorrow then. And I think indeed I'm looking at the time, and also getting Martin off the hook of trying to come up with answers to solve the world. But I think an abundance of ideas, that's maybe a very good summary of what Baltan Laboratories as an organization, and also within this festival and conference, is trying to generate. So I think there's no better way than to wrap this 2 days conference up with that statement, and leaves me again by thanking all of the speakers that have been waking up in the middle of the night, leaving their breakfast or whatever, changing clothes in between sessions, and then enlightening us with all their insights and interesting dialogues. As has been mentioned, later today, starting at 5 o'clock Central European time, a Zoom session will start with an introduction on a presentation, a lecture by Michel Bouwens that will start 15 minutes later, so 5:15 for people in our time zone. And it will be a more or less 1 hour lecture, and then there's a live Q&A afterwards. So if people are still up for that, then maybe I see some of you later today. And well, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I wish you all good luck with all your endeavors, projects, and ambitions. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
And yes, also this evening's session is pre-recorded actually, so the premiere will be this evening, and as all the other lectures, they are featured on the Economia YouTube channel, so you can find them there. So well, thanks a lot, and until our paths cross again.